Good evening, everybody, and welcome. And a very, very warm welcome to Rabbi Wohlgelernter. Whenever I have the privilege, and whenever I have this privilege of introducing Rabbi Wohlgelernter, it's always very difficult for me not to get too carried away, because he was one of the first people I met when we came to live in Modi'in. And Rabbi Vilna said to me, "Hu dover Anglit, don't talk to him." So I went and I spoke to him. I didn't know who he was or where he was from, whatever. And it was just like this really nice guy standing at the back of the shul. And I said to him, I'm Mike Starr. He says, "I'm Jeff Wohlgelernter." I had no idea he was a rabbi. I had no idea he had a massive community in San Diego that he had just left. I had no idea that a friend who was at school with my wife and grew up 4 doors away from me in Rhodesia had been part of his community. And we found out that we had so much in common. And the biggest thing that I got to realize about Rabbi Wohlgelernter is that he epitomizes the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot. The Mishnah says, "Kol ha'osek b'Torah lishma zocheh ledvarim harbeh." A person who delves into Torah, works in Torah, merits many, many things. And the Mishnah goes on to mention a couple of things. But the thing that stands out for me was, Umal bashto anavav yira. He becomes clothed in modesty and in fear of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And I think when we look at Rabbi Wohlgelernter, that's why he introduced himself to me. "I'm Jeff Wohlgelernter." He didn't say, "I'm Rabbi Wohlgelernter," because it doesn't enter his mind to say such a thing. He's such an honor, and when he delivers something in Torah, I love watching his face because he never stops smiling. His love of Torah, his love of Hashem, and his love of sharing his Torah with people is just something that's really amazing. And so it's unbelievable to have you back. You've been one of our best supporters and encouragers of this program, and please.
Thank you very much. When Mike called me and asked me if I would speak, it's been a few years, I think, maybe a year and a half, 2 years that I haven't been here. Something, those days I knew I was going to be on a little bit of vacation, and wherever I'm going to be, it's going to be a little bit of a schlep. But I knew that I was going to get an introduction like that, and I come just for that. Yasher Kayach, I really appreciate it. I feel always when I come back here, I feel like I'm coming back home. It's we spent almost 2 years here, and 2 very, very wonderful, amazing years. And it's just beautiful to be here, and beautiful to hear about this kehillah and how this kehillah is growing. And I just give you a bracha that you should go mechayil chayil, from strength to strength, and just continue to be able to strengthen yourselves and to be able to grow into Hashem and Tiferes to the Jewish people. The subject tonight is keeping the Mikdash alive. It's a good title for the 3 weeks. It gets you thinking a little bit. I have to be honest, when I said the title, I was pressed to give a title. So I picked something that I could sort of fit something else under it. And just, so it was a good title. I really had no idea what I was going to talk about. And then some thoughts started to form, and I realized that that's really the only thing to speak about now. There's a Gemara in Rosh Hashanah that the Gemara says, "Minayin sheishin zeichel Mikdash." That how do we know that we have this institution called zeichel Mikdash? That we do things that are a remembrance for the Beis Hamikdash. And we'll discuss that a little bit further in a moment. But the Gemara darshans, the Gemara expounds it from a pasuk, and the Gemara says, because Tziyoni deresh ein lo, that it's Zion, talking about that we're degraded and we're downtrodden, and that it's Zion, but deresh ein lo, there's nobody that seeks it. So the Gemara says from those words that deresh ein lo, that there's nobody that seeks it, michlal shetzricha drisha. From there we understand that you need people to be doresh. That's our obligation. If Tzion has nobody remembering her, then it's truly destroyed. And if Jews still continue to live with her, so then she stays alive and she still lives. And therefore our obligation, say Chazal, is not merely just to mourn its loss, and not merely just to remember, but to do things instituted in our lives of a Zeichel Hamikdash. But there are two ways to be doresh. There are two ways to really seek and to set your sights on the Mikdash. One is called Zeichel Hamikdash, and what I think people are more familiar with is Zeichel L'Churban, is a remembrance for the destruction of the temple. But if the point is to remember, then why did Chazal institute two completely different systems? As we're going to see in a moment, Zeicher L'Mikdash is not the same as Zeicher L'Churban. There are some overlaps, but they're two completely different systems. But why do I need two systems? Why do I need to remember a destruction and also to remember a Zeicher L'Mikdash, to remember the Mikdash? Because they really function for two different purposes. Zeicher L'Churban, the purpose is absence. It reminds me that something is broken, something's missing, something's unfinished in my life. The world is not what it should be. I build a home and I have to leave an amma by amma. A remembrance, a zeicher, that as beautiful as my home is, it's not complete because there's no mikdash. I stand under a chuppah, and at the greatest moment of joy, I'm reminded, you know what, my joy is limited. And not because even I need to take anything away from it, but it's by definition limited. That simcha that I'm feeling in my life has a ceiling. Because it has a ceiling. Because there is no mikdash. When there's a mikdash, there's no ceiling. When there's a mikdash, my feelings are real and raw, and they fly all over, but they're cut off. They can't go anywhere. I'm reminded when I go to Yerushalayim that I have to tear kriya. When I see that Makam Hamikdash, when I see the place where the temple was, when we put ashes on the head of a groom, when we say Al Naros Bavel, when we note that there are restrictions on music, whether they're practiced today in general life or not, there are in fact indeed restrictions on music and the kind of music that we listen to and when we listen to music. All of that creates a feeling of incompleteness, knowing that something is missing from my life and that nothing is whole. But that's not Zeicher L'Mikdash. That's Zeicher L'Churban. That's remembering the destroyed place of Yerushalayim. But Zeicher L'Mikdash is entirely different. Those aren't expressions of loss, but they're rather expressions of continuity. We take a lulav every single day on Sukkot as a Zeicher L'Mikdash. Because in the times of the temple, it was done inside of the temple each and every day, but only once outside of the temple. And we do it every single day on the second and the third and the fourth day. I'm reliving that experience of the Beis Hamikdash. I am doing and performing a Zeicher L'Mikdash. When I sit at the Seder, and I get to that third piece of food, after I've trudged through the matzah and the maror, and then joy, I get to mix the two together. And we say, Zeicher L'Mikdash Ki Hillel. I'm not remembering a practice that used to be done because Nebuch, I can't do it anymore. But I'm reliving that experience of this is the way the matzah and the maror were eaten. No, there's no korban pesach. There's no paschal lamb. But nevertheless, I am doing what they did in the temple. Not because I no longer have a temple, but because that temple is very real in my life. According to many shittas, counting the Omer, that today the counting of the Omer without the sacrifice of the Omer is being done again, not as a Zeicher L'Churban. This is what they used to do. I remember when in the old country we did it like this. No, this is what we do. This is a Zeicher L'Mikdash. This is keeping that Mikdash alive. Giving the shkalim, the hakafos that we do with the lulav around the bima. All of those are Zeicher L'Mikdash. These practices proclaim that the temple is still alive. and that it still defines Jewish life. It might be gone physically, but it's not gone spiritually. These practices proclaim in my life. Chazal never said, Zecher lebayis shahaya. They never use those words. It's not a Zecher lebayis shahaya, but it's a Zecher limikdash, to the Mikdash that continues to live inside of me. It might be hidden, but it's not erased. That sanctity that was placed into the world through the Beis Hamikdash has never been eradicated or erased, has never been removed. The Kuzari compares Eretz Yisrael to the heart of the body, but the Mikdash is the heart of the heart. And even if the body is scattered, the heart continues pumping life. And that influence continues even when it's unseen. The Beis Hamikdash might be absent from the skyline of Yerushalayim. You go and you stand by the Has Promenade, by the Tayelet, and you look over. And if you've got good eyes, you can see like Rabbi Akiva saw. You can see that Beis Hamikdash standing there. But it might not be, in effect, in reality, a part of the skyline of Yerushalayim. But it's not absent from the structure of Jewish life. Zecher l'Churban remembers what was lost. Zecher l'Mikdash remembers what still belongs to us. Zecher l'Churban is about memory. Zecher l'Mikdash is about anticipation. I'll give you a beautiful mashal. That when we lose our parents, there are two very different ways to remember our parents. The one is visiting the cemetery. That's analogous to Zecher l'Churban. But the other is making our mother's chicken soup. The other is using our father's tefillin. Or taking out his esrog box. That's a Zecher l'Mikdash. And in those, they remain very much alive. One remembers the loss. The other continues the relationship. In fact, Zecher l'Mikdash and Zecher l'Churban address two different dangers of Galus. There's the danger of despair in Galus, and there's the danger of assimilation. Zecher l'Churban fights despair. It reminds us of the greatness that once was. But Zecher l'Mikdash fights assimilation because we still belong to that greatness. That greatness is still very much alive. But if Chazal wanted us to remember the Mikdash and to keep it alive in our lives, why is there no particular holiday or no particular event that's really a Zecher l'Mikdash? There are diverse pieces. There's the Lulav, there's the Eimer. There are things that remind us to have a Zecher l'Mikdash. But why not one big ceremony? So if you take a look at the handouts, walk with me. Because in truth, Chazal instituted every single day an opportunity to have a Zecher l'Mikdash. Every single day. Every morning we rebuild the floor plan of the Beis Hamikdash. Our tefillah, our service, and the rhythm of our service is building a Beis Hamikdash. We're oile regel every single morning. Instead of walking through the gates of Yerushalayim, we enter through the siddur. Instead of ascending Har HaBayis with our feet, we ascend Har HaBayis with our words. we gather in the Ezras Nashim on the bottom of the picture. And there in the Ezras Nashim, where we gathered, it was called the Ezras Nashim, but it wasn't in fact the Ezras Nashim. It was the place of the gathering before we entered into the Mikdash. The place where we got our thoughts together. The place where we uttered brachas, the place where we focused ourselves, where we set our mind straight. And then we say the 15 brachos. We say Birchas HaShachar, we walk up those steps. And with each and every bracha, we reach higher and higher in recognizing that we exist because of God. And then we conclude with those words, Goimel Chasadim Tovim Li Amo Yisrael. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu does amazing things for his Jewish people. And as we walk up those steps to the Shar Nikanor, to the gates that will enter into the Azara, we leave the world behind us. We leave the nations of the world behind us. They can't enter into the Mikdash. And then we step into Ezras Yisrael and the Ezras Kayanim. We step into the Azara, into the courtyard of the temple, and there is the Mizbeach sitting in front of us. And in our davening, we say Korbanos. We talk about the sacrifices, we relive them. And then we're ready to enter into another realm. And we say the Yud Gimel Midos, the 13 ways that the Torah is interpreted, the hermeneutic principles. There are 12 steps, but in fact, there's 13 on the top floor. It becomes the 13th step. And as we walk up those steps to the Ulam, there we remind ourselves that we are partners with God. We have a written Torah, we have an oral Torah. And that oral Torah is how we bring that Torah alive. And then we enter into God's world, Baruch Shamar v'Hoya Olam, as we enter into the Ulam, that chamber before the Heichal. And then as we walk through the Ulam, Psuki de Zimra, and then uttering words that are similar to the Baruch Shamar, we say Yishtabach. And we go from the Ulam into the Heichal. Now we enter into the divine realm. Now we're about to say the Shema. And to say the Shema, there are 3 pieces of furniture inside of the Heichal. There's the Shulchan. There is the Mizbeach Hazav, the golden altar. There's the menorah. The Shulchan is a reminder of the material prosperity and the material God taking care of us in a material way. And the menorah is spirituality. And the menorah is a symbol of Torah. The 2 brachos that we say before the Kriya Shema, one of them is about creation, about the material world. Yotzer or v'orei choshech. Oseh shalom v'orei sakol. It's about the material world. Even though in there we talk about kadosh, 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 we talk about angels, but all of that entire bracha, is really about this world. Olam hazeh, it's about the physical world. And then the second bracha, Hava Rabbah, all about Torah. Those are the 2 preconditions for saying Shema Yisrael. We have to recognize that there is a world created by God, and it was created for a purpose, the Torah. That's why there are 2 brachas before we recite the Shema. To remind ourselves that there is a material world and a spiritual world, and those 2 worlds need to come together. And when we can see them coming together, that's when we can accept upon ourselves the yoke of heaven. And that's in the golden altar. That's represented by the Reach Nichayach Lashem, the beautiful, sweet smelling to God. Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. And now I'm ready to walk through into the Kodesh Kadoshim, into the Holy of Holies. And it's there that I stand. Me and God. My feet together. Silence, no interruptions. Facing one direction. Whispering, standing before the Shekhinah. Kohen Gadol did this 1 time a year. We do it 3 times a day. Zecher leMikdash. We are literally, with our tefillah, building a Mikdash, building the sanctuary to the Rebbeinu Shalom. The Churban Bayis didn't end access to the Kodesh Kadoshim. It transformed how we entered it. But it isn't only the format. It's not just the format of our davening that allows us to keep that Mishkan alive, that allows us to keep that Mikdash alive. Imagine, just stop for a moment and imagine, if you could tap into this when you daven Shmoneh Esrei, if you could tap into this when you davened Shachris, that you felt the progression, you felt the movement forward, walking through a Beis Hamikdash, and then you take 3 steps back. You walk back from the Kodesh Kadoshim, the Heichal, back into the Azorah. And it's there in the Azorah that we have the Chazor Sashatz, the repetition. And then we step back into the Ezras Noshim. Ashrei, Uvalet Zion, Aleinu, Shir Shal Yom. And imagine walking out from the Ezras Noshim, feeling that, Aleinu L'Shabeach La'adein HaKoil. I just walked into the Beis Hamikdash. I just rebuilt for myself the Heichal and the Kodesh Kadoshim. I don't have to wait till Tisha B'Av to visualize in front of me that Beis Hamikdash. I can do it every single day. But it's not just Shachris. Follow me to the next page. It's every Shmoneh Esrei. I could speak for an hour on this page. I'm going to try to do it very quickly. Every direction, every compass direction is a koyach that HaKadosh Baruch Hu puts into the world. And God comes into the world and into our lives through each and every one of these directions. Simply put, to the east, that's the spirit, the light that lives inside of our lives. To the north is material prosperity. To the west is the Shekhinah, the divine presence. And to the south, simply put, for a quick class, is fertility. We know that when the Jews camped around the Mishkan, we camped on 4 sides around the Mishkan, 3 tribes on each side. Yehuda, Yisachar, Zvulun representing the side of the spirit. Dan, Asher, Naphtali representing material prosperity. Ephraim, Menashe, Binyamin representing the Shekhinah. And Reuven, Shimon, and Gad representing fertility. When Chazal set up a Shmoneh Esrei, they set up the Shmoneh Esrei, the middle 13 brachos of the weekday Shmoneh Esrei, to parallel that model. Because that was the model that the Mizbeach followed, and that the Kohen Gadol followed. The Kohen followed every single day when he did the Korban Tamid. The daily sacrifice that was offered every single day. The blood was sprinkled in 2 places, which I'll show you in a moment. But it was put on 2 corners of the Mizbeach, which covered 4 sides. He took the blood because the blood was Kidamu HaNefesh. The blood is the life. That life is the life paralleling and mimicking our lives. And as a representative of the Jewish people, the Kohen Gadol went and he put the blood on those 4 sides to say that every single one of our kochos is dedicated to God. And God, you need to fill our lives with all of that you can fill. And that was what the Korban Tamid did for us every single day. It connected us to the Ribono Shalom. And it connected us to every single koach that is available to us in the world, and to remind us to use our kochos to be able to dedicate them to Hashem. And we know that when the temple was destroyed, the tfilos corresponded to the tmidim, to the daily sacrifice. Walk up the ramp. Every turn we take is to the right, and we go around to the right side. And go to that dot on the northeast corner. And that was the first place that the Kohen put the blood. The blood from the north, the blood from the east. from the spirit and material prosperity for the individual. And then we continue around to the southwest corner. And there the Kohen put the dam on the south and the west for the Shekhinah and fertility, the material and spiritual blessings for the community of Israel. And if you look at the brachos of the Shmoneh Esrei, they're actually split into groups of 3 that parallel their directions. The brachos of wisdom, repentance, and atonement. Those brachos, the first 3 brachos, Atachonin li'adam das, those brachos are there asking for the spiritual blessing for me, the individual. And then the brachos of freedom, which people get lost in. And they think that bracha for Geula is about the freedom of the Jewish people. It's the freedom of me from myself. It's the freedom of me from the things that drag me down and that hold me back from being the best me that I could be. And then the bracha of health and prosperity. Those brachas are the brachas of material prosperity for the community, for the individual. But now that has to change. Now my focus needs to be on the community. That's the bracha of the ingathering of the exiles. Tekabeh shefer gadol l'cheruseinu. The sanes tekabeh tzgal yusenu, draw us all in together. That's the transition bracha. And now the next 3 brachas. Justice, retribution for the godless. Ala tzadikim v'ala chasidim, the bracha of the reward for the righteous. That's the spiritual blessing, that precondition that's necessary for the coming of the Geula, for the community. And then the physical things that are necessary. The rebuilding of Jerusalem, the coming of Mashiach. And then ultimately all of that leads to the acceptance of prayers. And every single Shmoneh Esrei, I rebuild that Mizbeach. Every single Shmoneh Esrei, I offer a korban tamid, a daily sacrifice. Zecher leMikdash, as a remembrance for the Mikdash. It's not just a remembrance of the temple, but it's a remembrance that creates the temple. But now comes the $1 million question. What's the necessity to keep that Mikdash alive? Why did Chazal set their sights on Zecher leMikdash? Not just Zecher leChurban, not just reminding us never to forget what you once had and never to stop pining away for it, but to ensure that it is still instituted in your life and a very part of your Jewish reality. First of all, we understand that the Mikdash was literally the center of the universe. But it was the center of the universe not only because HaKadosh Baruch Hu created first the Even HaShasiyah, that little foundation stone, and from there he created the Makam HaMikdash, and from there he created Yerushalayim, and from there he created Eretz Yisrael, and from there he created the rest of the world. So when we call Jerusalem the eye of the universe, it is literally the eye of the universe. It was the first thing created. But it's also that centerpiece. It's the Makam HaChibur, the place of attachment between this world and the next. It's the place that reminds us to take basar, to take yayin, to take our first fruits, to take our gifts, and to dedicate them and our lives to the Ribono Shel Olam. That a piece of meat becomes not a piece of meat, but it becomes something sanctified when we remember to live with that temple in the center. It reminds us that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is at the center of our existence. There's no tribes, there's no king, there's no army, nothing in our center. Only the Shekhinah, only the divine presence. That's our vision of society. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu sits in the middle. And what happens when you remove the center? Chaos ensues. Everything vies for the center. They stop orbiting around God and they start orbiting around themselves. It's called sinas chinam. Sinas chinam happens when I'm no longer dedicated to that master of the universe in the middle. But when it's me that's dictating what's right and what's wrong, and what's good and what's bad, what's comfortable and uncomfortable. We become what we long for. When we long for Kedusha, we live for Kedusha. And we become Kedoshim. And that's why the Mikdash is so critical. The Zeichel and Mikdash is not a remembrance for something that happened in the past. But a Zeichel and Mikdash is a remembrance for the way that we're meant to live now. And that's why we need to keep Yerushalayim alive. Not because it needs us to remember it, but because we need Yerushalayim to remember who we are. If the Mikdash fades from our consciousness, then the spiritual map that's guided the Jewish people for millennia begins to fade along with it. You know, the 3 weeks are often viewed as a season of nostalgia, of remembering what used to be. Chazal intended something much greater. Every morning we rebuild the Beit Hamikdash. Every Shemona Esrei, we enter into it and we sacrifice on its altar. Every Amen echoes through the courtyard. The Mikdash is not only our past, it's our present, and it escorts us into the future. It gives new meaning to Bilvavi Mishkan Evne. It doesn't say Bilvavi Mikdash Evne. Bilvavi Mishkan Evne. Because the Mishkan was always on the go. The Mishkan came with us where we needed to be. It's why the Aron had staves on its side that were never allowed to be taken off of the Aron. It was an Isur D'Oraisa Torah prohibition to remove the staves from the side of the Aron, even though it was stationary, because it's only temporarily stationary. The Torah, the Shekhinah, goes with us wherever we go. It's not just rooted to one place. It lives inside of us. Bilvavi Mishkanevne Ladar Kevaydai, for his great glory. Uva Mishkan Mizbeach Hakim. And in the Mishkan, as a Mizbeach, I will place Lekarne Hodo, for his great glory and honor. Ulener Tamid Ekachli, and as a daily, as a constant light, as an eternal light, I will take the Eish of the Akedah, I will take my Mesiras Nefesh. Ulekarban Akriv Leis Nafshi. And as a sacrifice, I will offer myself to God. Nafshi HaYechida. It's not just about building a Mikdash. It's about engaging my heart to make my heart into a Mikdash, into the kind of place where the Shekhinah can dwell and rest. We spend so much time during the 3 weeks focusing on Sinas Chinam. You imagined, I imagined, that you were going to come to a talk tonight somehow about Ben Adam L'Chaveroi, how we have to be nicer people during the 3 weeks. Because if we're not nicer people, then it's as if we destroyed the Beis Hamikdash. Kamsa and Bar Kamsa, they're all fabulously important and fundamental themes that need to be discussed. but they're not the root. The root is Zeichel Hamikdash, not Zeichel Churban. The root is keeping that Mikdash alive in our lives, reminding ourselves of what we revolve around and what is really the center of our existence. What shapes us into a people who are worthy of its return. You want to see a Mikdash? Don't wait. Build it now. Live with it now. Uncover it now. Bilvavi Mishkanevne. That's our mandate during the 3 weeks. Not merely Zecher LeChurban, but Zecher LeMikdash. Keep that Mikdash alive. We should be Zeicher to that in our own lives, and to be able to see that Mikdash come alive in physical reality, so that there is a place where we can take our hearts and attach it to that place, and that our entire nation is nothing more than a Zeicher LeMikdash. It lives with that constant reflection of that Kedusha and that holiness of the Ribono Shel Olam spread throughout the entire world. Amen. I'll take questions, but every time I ask that, so usually people don't ask any questions. So I worry that it either means that I was very clear, or you have no idea what I was just talking about. Thank you very much, Rabbi. We'll see you the next time. Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Oh, yes. So Levi is really in the center. He's the Mizbeach. He was the center, but the families of Levi were also split on 4 sides. So they also paralleled that that breakdown of the 4 directions, the 4 points. In the Mizbeach, where he sits, is that he really sits at the center, which is why he's the functionary on the Mizbeach. Okay, thank you very much.